So we are in Pirkei of Pirkei Avos, Mishnah Tet. This Mishnah looks like it's going to take us a full week to finish, meaning from last week through to this week. The Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had asked his 5 main Talmidim to find the path. We spoke 2 sessions ago about the first 2 of Ayin Tova and Chaver Tov. The last time we spoke about Shachein Tov and Ro'et Hanolad, and now we finally got to the one which is the winning one, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, when he's told to go out and look at the world, not in the base medrash, but to look outside of the world and see what is the trait, which is the winning trait, then he chose Leiv Tov. I just want to read again just to understand what we're looking for. It's been a few days. In Rabbeinu Yonah, when he describes what exactly they're looking for, says the following. He says, we're looking for one midah that a person can complete himself in, because when a person has one midah which he acquires with shleimus, that will be a key point through which he'll be able to access all the other middas, and all the other middas will be easy for him once he's able to acquire that. So we're looking how this point is going to be an access point, which is going to be the access point to all the other points. Let's see what Leiv Tov is. So we actually, I don't know who was there, but we spoke about this exact Rabbeinu Yonah. We quoted inside in the Shalosh Shudas Shabbaton in Tzvat, the last time that we danced together whilst holding hands before everything broke apart. But at that point when we spoke, we definitely quoted this exact Rabbeinu Yonah on that point. There was in a different context of Yetet Mitzrayim. Now we're going to bring it in its own context of Leiv Tov. So he brings first the Rambam, who speaks about general tikkun hamidus, but he says that's very, very general, meaning if it just means, Leiv Tov just means tikkun hamidus in a very general sense, because all midus emanate from the heart, then he says that it's not something very specific, which is in line with everything else that we've been saying here, which are very unique and specific points. So therefore he says, Ein perush mityashev lefi darkenu. Rabbeinu Yonah says this answer doesn't answer within our flow of what we're looking for, especially an access point, a key point, which is specific, which all the other midus will come through, and therefore he goes and says, V'nireh lefaresh, ki Leiv Tov rotzeh lomar midat haratzon. What Leiv Tov is the will, it's desire. And what does that mean exactly? Can we get more accurate and more specific on what that is? So says Rabbeinu Yonah, v'zeu hasavlan. It's someone who is, I don't know exactly how to translate savlan. I hope through our discussions that we'll get more of a clarification on it. But I'm going to go with the phrase easygoing, someone who's able to sovel. But the trouble is that in modern Hebrew, sovel has a negative connotation as well. Someone who's sovel is someone who's suffering. He does not mean it in that context. He means it as someone who's able to carry without a burden. And we're going to explain that in more detail. She'enu katzar ruach. He doesn't have he doesn't have quickness of breath, literally. Katzar ruach means quickness of breath, which means that when you hear a certain topic, it makes you pant. It makes you feel, oh my gosh, what's going to be, a nervousness. Eino katzar ruach. There's a certain sense of calmness here. Umitrachek mimidot hakas. It's the opposite of getting angry. Umashiv ma'anei, you're able to reply or respond to any situation that comes your way with the calmness, with the quietness, maybe an inner quietness. Af ki yasuro dovara, even when people do things against you with the intention of being bad, yisbelenu, he's able to handle it. Ve'ein mar b'fihu, and it doesn't cause him to be bitter. Why? Ki chiko mamtakim v'kulo machmadim. Now we're going to elaborate on this at great depth, because I believe this, and based on, as I said to you, my teachings of Rabbi Shachatovich, this is going to be a major key. So let's go off topic for a little bit and we'll come back. Sometimes you go on shidduchim, or you're talking to the shadchanit, and she says, this girl, she's willing to mavater for Torah. Willing to mavater for Torah. Is that a good thing or not a good thing? So initially it sounds like it's a good thing. She's willing to lead a life of suffering, where she's not going to have all what she really wants, but she's willing to mavater. She's going to be mavater in order for the sake of a life of Torah. So you should probably stay away from people like that. Now, even though it sounds like it's a very good thing, you want to learn in Kollel for many years and become a big Talmid Chacham, and you have a wife who's willing to be mavater, but the very concept of mavater, what does mavater mean? Mavater means I have a will in one direction, but I'm going to force myself to go in a different direction. Now, that forcing oneself, is that a healthy thing or not a healthy thing? So it's a great strength. And there are certain times where a person has a desire to do something inappropriate, and he's able to have control and force himself to do against what his lower base self wants that moment. It's a tremendous trait that if a person is able to say, I have a higher thought and I want to go according to my higher thought, it's a wonderful thing. But is one supposed to be leading their life with a sense of vatranut, with a sense of I'm forced to do something? Or is there a different path? Is there a path where a person could do the will of Hashem without it being a sense of needing to force oneself? And this is a very key point. And it's going to cause us a bit of conflict, and we're going to hopefully resolve it. You see, when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asks them to choose a path, he afterwards asked them to see another path which you shouldn't go on. And when Rabbi Elazar ben Arach says Leiv Tov, and then the path you shouldn't take, he says Leiv Ra, you see that it's not that you have one heart, and sometimes you're in a good mood, and sometimes you're not in a good mood. It's not, rather, it's two entirely different paths. There's a path which is a straight path, let's say a path of integrity, you might want to say, which is a path that you should take. And there's another path which afterwards Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asks Rabbi Elazar and says, what's the path you shouldn't take? And he says, okay, there's another path that you should not take, which is called the path of Leiv Ra, a bad path. Now, what exactly is Leiv Tov and Leiv Ra, which are two different paths? And we need to take clarity on this point. But let's try and define it. And we'll go back to Rabbi Yonah. We're going to use other Meforshim as well, which we're all going to come back to the same point. Leiv Tov is a sense of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or not even serving Hashem, but just leading one's life in general from a place of naturalness, a place where it resounds with you, a place where everything is calm in your world because you lead your life according to an innate natural way, which that innate natural way is in line with Hashem, and there's no conflict where you have to force yourself to do the will of Hashem against. And what's the Leiv Ra? The Leiv Ra is where a person is, everything is difficult, everything is a challenge, everything is being forced. And even if you are eventually doing the will of Hashem, it comes from a place which is to some degree external. So let's just give an example of those two. It's Leila Seder, and you're eating matzah. That's a very good thing to do. It's a mitzvah d'oraita. How do you go around performing it? So there's a way of performing it in Leiv Tov, and there's a way of performing it in Leiv Ra. Either way you fulfill the mitzvah. We're not talking here about mitzvot, we're talking here about midot, right? The way that a person should relate to the world, one's mindset, right? We're adopting a mindset here. So either way, we're talking about doing the mitzvah of eating matzah. How do you do it? So a Leiv Tov mindset would be something like this. I feel blessed to be a child of Hashem. I feel blessed to be free. This is a night where I can express my freedom from base desires and rather aligning myself with the pashtut of serving Hashem. I don't need anything extra in my life. I don't need extra leaven that's blown things out of proportion. I'm able to eat the matzah in a way of relating to the simplicity, the non-complexity of serving Hashem from an innate good place. And a person, the time comes to eat the matzah and eat his matzah. And when he's eating the matzah, he's thinking, Eze kef la'asot ratzon Hashem. My will is to do the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it's a place of joy. That's a Leiv Tov, eating matzah. Now let's talk about a Leiv Ra, eating matzah. Okay, there's a machloket, whether it's 2 minutes or 9 minutes. We go by the average of 4 minutes as far as how quickly a person can eat. Now I know that the principle of the eating is the amount of time that it's normal to eat, but that's not normal because we have to eat it in a less of a normal time, the fastest per time that a person could ever eat the amount of time. Now maybe for some people who are old, it takes them 9 minutes, and maybe for me, naturally it takes me 4 minutes, but because there is a shita that says that one can naturally eat in 2 minutes, so I'm going to try and naturally eat with the sheet within 2 minutes, what naturally takes me 4 minutes to eat. So are you ready? Okay. And he takes his matzah, and he sits there with an eye on the clock. He has his big clock in front of him. Wait 1 second, I'll show you. This is his clock. He puts his clock in front of him. He puts it down over here, and he says, okay, all the matzah is ready. I have it. Ready? So this is actually a good clock because you don't see seconds on this clock. So this would not be a good reflection. In his one, it has seconds as well. And he goes, ready, steady. And he goes, now there is not an iota of thought of Hashem loves us. Hashem took us out of Egypt. I'm a child of Hashem. Serve Hashem for a place of naturalness. If you would ask him what's the essence of Pesach, it would be very far for him to think it's a time of freedom, because he doesn't feel free. He feels bound to these details where he's in this intense place of having to do the will of Hashem. But it's not natural. It's not smooth. It's not Leiv Tov. So we're going to come back to this again. I'm going to use another one of the Meforshim just to explain it. And this will give us another kind of a strength with an idea. And then we're going to give more examples and details. For the first time ever in these shiurim, we are going to be quoting Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch has a commentary on Pirkei Avos. In fact, when I was in South Africa and I went to visit Levi's father, the chief rabbi of South Africa, he was also working on a Pirkei Avos project. And I saw him sitting there with the commentary of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch in front of him, and that's what he was in the middle of working on when I came to his house. So I want to read to you now, although it's funny that I'm reading in Hebrew because I don't think he wrote it in Hebrew. I may as well read it in English, but the version I have is the Hebrew version. So I'm going to read the Hebrew version, or maybe I'll just freely translate the Hebrew version. But you can definitely get this in English and not have to struggle over the Hebrew when, anyway, it wasn't written in Hebrew. So he says, there's a difference between Tov Leiv and Leiv Tov. And he uses these differences in phrases to help us get clearer definitions, which what we're looking for is going to be very beneficial. He says, Tov Leiv is where a person is kind-hearted. Tov Leiv. And he gives an example of that you have someone walking past your house and they're leaving your house and you don't want to leave them empty-handed. You're Tov Leiv. So you say, call them back quickly, and you look in your cupboards and you find some packets of vaflim or some other delicious Israeli bamba, and you give it to them and you say, I can't leave you empty-handed. Here you go, my dear friend. And they walk off, and you feel that you have this trait of wanting to leave them in a good place. Tov Leiv. You're kind-hearted. So that's what Tov Leiv is. But then he says, but that's very, very different to what Leiv Tov is. He says the word Leiv in Yiddishkeit always means the most central essence, the Leiv. In fact, the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, if you look up, the Moreh Nevuchim has a list of words and what they're used for in Torah, in Tanakh, and on the word Leiv, he says the word Leiv means most central innate point. He gives more than one interpretation. That's one of the interpretations he gives. Leiv. And therefore, sometimes Leiv can be referring to one's thoughts, even though your thoughts are up here in your mind, even though your heart is down here, because the word Leiv is referring to most central point, which thoughts could be your most central point. So he says, the word Leiv is always the most central essence of man. And that's referring to one's inner desires and who they are, what they're striving for, what they're looking for in their life. And that contains one's inner thoughts, one's inner world. And therefore, the inner place of all of one's desires and all is not their actions. The action is only the external thing that comes as a result later on. Rather, it's referring to their inner world, the way they view their inner world. If it's a world which comes from a place of Tara, which comes from a place of a natural place, and that's the essence of the person, and he will be shlemut. He will have a completeness to him because he's under the rule of good. He's Leiv Tov. His essence, his core, is of, no, we're not talking about here someone who's just kind and wants to give you an extra wafer. Rather talking about one's whole perspective, the whole essence. It comes from their innate natural place. This person is prepared for all the good in the world. Because Leiv Tov mekif be'emet kol hadrachim va'emtzim hamoluchim latov. This person who's in a state of Leiv Tov, it will bring them to all the places of good. And he's using this in the context of our Mishnah to explain why Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai chose this path. Because if you look at it, when you look at the earlier four are all specific. This one incorporates everything else. Let's look at that again. What was the four that we had earlier on? Ayin Tova only applies in a specific scenario. If you remember how we applied the concept of Ayin Tova, it's when a particular situation happens, I could choose to look at it in a positive way, or I could choose to look at the situation in a negative way. And Ayin Tova is someone who chooses to look at it in a positive way, which is a healthy thing, very positive, very, as I said, that's part of my essence of how I view the world. It's very much core to who I am, but it's still referring to a particular situation. A particular situation happens to you, how do you respond to it? Chaver Tov, we also define that way. How do we define Chaver Tov? It's that you lead your life, but you need to have a central anchor that you relate back to in order that you can realign who you are. So again, you see it's something very specific. It's something which is going to align you with who you want to be. So it's not just specific and irrelevant. It's specific. It's going to always realign you with who the essence of who you are is. But it applies in a specific area. Shachein Tov is the same idea. Shachein Tov we defined as, in order for a person to work on their midas, they need to be challenged on a constant basis, dafka with those people who they have conflict with. So that's something which will constantly refine you. But again, it's a very limited thing. It's when you're at home, when you have conflict with your neighbors, when you're interacting with your neighbors. Haro'es HaNolad, that we defined in our last year, that was also a crucial idea of in every event, every scenario that's ever happened to you, you should pause before you take on some new project, and you should say, where will me getting involved in this project lead to long term? What will the long-term result be? It could be that in many specific things that you choose to do in your life, having the Ro'es HaNolad mindset, you'll gain tremendously and you'll always be on the path of Hashem. But again, when you think about it, it's when new situations and scenarios come your way. What is the mindset that is, as Rabbi Elazar ben Arach quotes and Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai labels, Bichlal devarav divrechem, incorporated in all of your words, for previous Talmidim, incorporated in all of your 4 words is what he's saying. He incorporates all of your words. Why does it incorporate all of it? And now we're getting an understanding of what Lev Tov is. After seeing Rav Shimshon Farhash, after seeing a little bit of Rabbeinu Yonah, Lev Tov is like a child. A child is a beautiful example of Lev Tov. A child doesn't have complicated thoughts of maybe he meant this and I meant that, and maybe he's trying to get me and he's trying to work out this and he's doing it because he has some ulterior motive. And a child plays and he's happy. And he's not just happy because he doesn't have worries of the world. He's happy because the nature of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu made us is Lev Tov. There's a natural state of where the world is good, things are good, everything's going to work out well. You don't have to get complicated or caught up in complications. The world is good. What happens when a child gets into a fight with a friend because the child took his toy? Crying, shouting, screaming, right? You distract him for a minute, happy, swinging, playing. Now adults look at that and they go, how do they do it? How does a child do that? When someone offends me, I carry that weight for weeks or at least days. And not only do I suffer, but the next person who I meet, they suffer as well, because whatever I took upon myself, I carry it through with me to the next person. That's where an adult takes on Lev Ra. Lev Ra is when you have some interaction with someone, or it could be that you don't even have, but you imagine there was an interaction with someone. It didn't even really happen, but you think maybe they thought that about you, something like that. And then you enter a state of mind, an emotional state, where now everything in the world has gone wrong. Everything is bad. And now with that focus, you're now going to interpret everything in your world as being negative. And every person who now comes to relate to you, you relate to them in a different way. And you carry this burden and this weight throughout everything that you then relate to. Some people are in Lev Ra their whole lives. Some people are triggered to be in Lev Ra when someone else harms them. Some people enter Lev Ra when they're scared, when something scary happens. But then they allow themselves to get into a state of Lev Ra. That becomes their way of life. Their way of life is, something bad happened to me. Now that justifies that I view the world in a negative way. And now myself is the primary one who's going to suffer, but also anyone I interact with is going to suffer. What Rabbeinu Yonah said was, you don't have to do that. Let's read the words of Rabbeinu Yonah again after having had that introduction. Someone who has Lev Tov is a savlan. Now, a savlan doesn't mean someone who's suffering. Actually, he's not suffering at all. Quite the opposite. It's not someone who's sovel. It's someone who's a savlan. He's able to carry it. It doesn't affect him. He's not being mavater. He's not saying, okay, I'll let this one pass, but really, and then somewhere deep down in his heart, he's building up a grudge. Not at all. He's not kotzer ruach. He's far away from anger. Af ki yaseh lo davar ra, even when someone does something bad against him, yisbalenu. Now look at these words, important words. Ve'ein mar b'fihu, meaning there are some people who are sovel, they take it, but they're still mar b'fihu, but they're still bitter about it. And that then eventually comes out where they explode later on. They're mavater and again and again and again and again. And then at some point they say, how many times can I keep quiet about this matter already? And then they blow out of proportion everything else. But what Rabbeinu Yonah is speaking about is Yisbelenu ve'ein marba fihu. But they're not getting bitter about it. Now you're going to say to me, okay, Tzvi, very nice. And you've quoted Rabbeinu Yonah, and we've quoted Rav Shushan Rosh, very nice. But like, how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you remain in a state of Leiv Tov? How do you not go on the path of Leiv Ra? Meaning, I've got the definition clear. Definition of Leiv Tov is all events that take place in the world don't bother me. I'm easygoing. I'm able to handle them. I see Tuv Hashem. I'm like a child who, although I may get shaken at the moment when something doesn't go my way, and that's very natural. Of course, that would be natural. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, when his stick was thrown down to the ground and it turned to a snake, he jumped back and he got a shock. That's fine. In the moment, of course, you're going to have a shake, but that doesn't affect your continuation of your life because you live in a state of Leiv Tov. Let's say, for example, you've invested in stocks. Okay, so you have a stock. Now, you may or may not have done yourself a big disservice because are you going to check that stock daily? And your emotional state is going to be dependent on if the stock went up or if the stock went down. Your whole core, your whole essence now is dependent on some little number, plus 0.25, minus 0.25. Your whole day is going to be affected by that little number. Or let's say an even more ridiculous one. Let's say you support a football team. Okay, so now there are 11 goyim who live in Brazil or maybe in Manchester. And one of those goyim, he was supposed to kick the ball in between, just missed. And the ball went outside of the pole. And because of that, instead of being the number on that screen being 3-1, it was 3-2 or 2-1 or 3-1. Now, your emotional state is going to be linked to what some goy hit a ball in between two poles or just missed the two poles. Are you crazy? Are you insane? Why would you link your emotional state to that? 1 minute, just plugging in the computer before I lose you. Fantastic. So you see, people in this world, for worse, connect their emotional state to external factors. Those external factors could be points that they have on a team, could be points they have on a stock exchange, could be they're growing a tree. And they were looking forward to eating this fruit that was growing on their tree, but oops, it fell off before it was ripe, and now their whole emotional state goes kaput. Why? Because of a fruit. Why do you link yourself to those things? In England, people link themselves to the weather. To the weather. It rains outside and they say, oh, I was going to have a good day, but now I see it's raining and, what can you do? Now my whole emotional state for the day is kaput. And in America, they attach it to 4 different seasons, sometimes baseball, sometimes basketball, sometimes they have different seasons, which they randomly at 4 different points during the year link their emotional state to. It's insane. Leiv Tov is where your core is in your Leiv. Instead of your core being at some external random thing which is out of your control, you link your inherent state to yourself and your path in life that you're taking. And then you're in a state where you're in control and you're able to guide it. So Rabbeinu Yonah says, there's an unhealthy place where something negative happens to you and you're sovel b'mar b'fiyu. That's one bad state, where you take it, you don't get angry, you don't make a fuss, but you're bitter inside. That's not what we're describing here. We're not talking about being mevater. If we ever are zoche to learn chosen classes together, you will hear me say that the purpose of marriage is not to be mevater. It's not to be the other extreme either of always having your way. But there's something in the middle where you don't have to always have your way or have her way, but not be mevater. It's unhealthy for marriage. It will create more tension in the long term. Let me read to you. Oh, so we're saying, how can you do it? That's what we're trying to get an idea of how you do it. Before I give the answer of how you do it, I just want to read to you another source of the Rishonim to give strength to this idea that this is a concept. And this is Sefer HaChinuch, who speaks about Leiv Tov directly. It's Sefer HaChinuch in Mitzvah Taf Tet Zayin. There are 2 mitzvahs of not being jealous. And the Sefer HaChinuch is defining what's the difference between the 2 mitzvahs. So I'm going to skip all the Lamdanus aspect of it and just get to the relevant part for us for today. So he defined that the first one is in action, the second one is in emotion. And then he says, emotion. Can we be commanded in emotion? And this is a crucial rishon to know. You should know this very well. You don't have to know word for word, but you should definitely always remember the concept of this Sefer HaChinuch, because it is a major key in your avodas amidas and your emotional health. And this I'm reading inside because it was written in this language. Va'al titma lomar. Don't be surprised by what I'm saying. How can a person not take control to desire things? How can I not desire all that which my friend has? How could the Torah forbid me? Something which person is not in his control. This is not true. Meaning, anyone out there who says, but I just feel that. That's just what I feel. And when I get into a bad state because I'm desiring something of someone else and I feel jealous of it, that's just what I feel. What do you want from me, God? That's just what I feel. And he gets a little bit harsh about this. You'll forgive me, these words are harsh, but I'm just quoting. Lo yomru oto zulati atipshim haraim v'chataim benafshotav. Sorry, I'm quoting Rishonim. A person who says this, the only one who would say this, is a wicked fool who sins in their soul. That's very harsh. Why would he use such a harsh phrase? But maybe he's using such a harsh phrase because people use this to excuse themselves from the avodas Hashem. They say, what can I do? This is what I feel. What can I do? This is natural to me. And then they, instead of saying what's natural to me being the leiv tov, their higher sense of self, they say what's natural to me is their leiv ra, which is their lower sense of self. Meaning they're taking a true thing of natural, but they align it with negative. And they go, God, what do you want from me? This is my natural self. As if it's out of their control. What we're learning in this Mishnah is that your natural self is in your control. You can take control of what your natural self is. Ki amnam biyad adam limno atzmo u'machshavatav uvatav mikol mi sheyirtzeh. It's within man's hand to control his thoughts, his desires as he wishes. It's not saying that it's a switch that one moment you can just do it. It's not saying that. But it is saying it's an avodah that you can take on and you can accomplish. It's within your reshus, within your das, it's within your control to bring forward and bring far. I'm not going to explain to you this principle in depth. I just have to tell you this amazing thing. I'm learning a type of a therapy, and unbelievable skills they have there, unbelievable. So in the last session that we had, there was a skill that we learned, which was if there's something that you like, which is not good for you, how can you naturally, without being mavater and forcing yourself, but in a very natural way, how can you naturally get yourself not to like that anymore? I'm talking about two examples that came up. One was someone who smokes and he wants to stop smoking. And one was someone who always eats junk food, specific junk food, like bizli or bamba or pretzels, things like that. And he always just finds himself opening a packet and opening a packet and opening a packet. And he just can't, he does it the whole time and he wants to stop it. So I'm not going to go into the whole thing because it's lengthy and it sounds miraculous, but it works. And the one person there just came on to share his story, and he hasn't smoked for, I think, 8 years. And the one person was talking about junk food, and he only did it recently, but for 8 months he hasn't touched. And it was after one session of doing a particular type of an exercise, which goes down to the subconscious in a very logical and clear way, but it's a particular method, unbelievable. They were able to get to the core of the matter and take control of the ratzon. It's in our control. It's something within our will. I'm going to give one skill today, which is going to be our concluding point, but these topics are within our will, within our ability. Concluding the Sefer HaChinuch, and then I want to give the skill. A person's heart is in his hands. He can direct his heart in any way that he wishes. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who created and knows the insides of all aspects of man. There's nothing too big, nothing too small from all man's ability. It's beyond his control, and therefore a person is responsible for it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you, and he gives you the guidance and the instruction to take control of these areas. There's nothing greater for man than his mind. Where he gets it good, where he takes his mind to a place of goodness, zakah and purity. Listen to the words of the Sefer Chinuch. Don't force yourself to try and change your actions. That's a battle. It's a battle. If your desire and your will is not there, you're trying to mevater and change action, but you don't want to, then it's going to be an uphill struggle. But if you can get to the leiv, and you can have a leiv tov, then you don't have a struggle. The actions will follow. This is Sefer Chinuch. And that's what the leiv tov, the concept of leiv tov is, shibchu chachamim b'mesechet Avos, the rabbis praise in Mesechet Avos. So I want to give two stories, which we'll conclude with, just to explain this concept. One of Moshe Feinstein, and one of Rav, the Alei Shor, Rav Volby. Rav Shochatovich, as I said, he was Meshamish many Gedolim, and in the summer, in the camps in New York, I know it's a hard thing to discuss right now, but once upon a time, there was this thing called camps in New York, and he would go with Rav Moshe Feinstein to the Catskills, or wherever they would go, and he would sit with him, and they would have a chavrusa, and they would learn together in the mornings. That was the morning seder of Shochatovich and Moshe Feinstein. Pretty impressive. So people used to come from the Catskills, and they would come and talk to Moshe Feinstein. He was that Gadol Hador who was your bungalow colony neighbor, and people would come to him and speak to him about different things. And sometimes Rav Moshe Feinstein would tell Rav Shochatovich to leave, and sometimes he would say that he could stay. Derech Agav, this would happen also to Rav Volby later on. So a woman came in while they were learning, and she had a very, very, very difficult story. And Rav Moshe Feinstein said to Rav Shochatovich, you can stay. So she started telling her story, and Rav Shochatovich noted that when Rav Moshe Feinstein was listening, there were tears in his eyes, and he was absolutely with her in her story, emotionally connected to her, sharing all the challenge and the emotional turmoil that she was going through. And then after he heard her out, he gave her guidance, and then she left and thanked him. And then Rav Moshe Feinstein went immediately back to where he was and carried on from where they were in their learning. Rav Shochatovich wasn't able to do that. And he said to Rav Moshe Feinstein, Kvod Harav, probably in Yiddish, I don't know what language they spoke in, Kvod Harav, Kvod Harav. How did you do that? How did you just switch back into going? So Rav Moshe Feinstein said to him, Yesh leiv chitzoni veleiv pnimi. A person has to have an external heart and an internal heart. And this is a point that many people who work in psychology or in Rabbanos, if they're Rav Kehila, would do very well to know. Because there's a big challenge here in this topic. If you have a heart, which is the core of who you are you going to connect or are you not going to connect? If you don't connect to the person who you're speaking to, then you're not with them. There's no empathy. You're this external, lofty person who doesn't really relate to the people who are coming to talk to them. You won't be able to really help them. But if you do relate to them, then it will burn you up inside. You'll collapse. If you hear the tzoros of every individual and you're fully with them, you won't have any core sense of self left. It will be very challenging for you to relate to anyone else in a normal and healthy way. How do you do that? So Rav Moshe Feinstein said, don't do what those people do where they don't connect their heart, where you become insensitive. That's inappropriate. You won't be with them. You have to give them your heart. But within your heart, there are different layers. There's an inner heart and an outer heart. Rav Moshe Feinstein said, I have a core inner heart. The only people who are ever allowed there is myself, my wife, my sons, my children, and my very, very close Talmidim. They're the only ones who enter my inner heart. And that inner heart is very well protected. And then he quoted a pasuk from Mishnah Perek Daled, pasuk Kaf Gimel, Mikol Mishmar Nitzor Libecha, Ki Mimenu Totzot Chaim. Everything that you guard, the greatest thing you have to guard is your heart. And Rav Moshe Feinstein explains it's referring to your inner heart, because out of there emanates life. Your core life, your core self emanates from your heart. So I have an inner heart, which that is protected. But then I have an outer layer of my heart, which is my heart. It's my emotions. I connect to it, which is where when I relate to people, I relate to them with emotion and with empathy, and I connect. You have to learn the secret of the inner heart and the outer heart. There are certain things that you do connect to, but it doesn't affect your core essence, but you're able to retain a sense of stability in the essence of who you are. When Rav Shochatovich moved to Eretz Yisrael, and he learned under Rav Wolbe, he heard the exact same idea of Rav Wolbe, but explained in a different way, different mashal, but in a mashal which is very useful for us to use, more practical. Rav Wolbe, instead of using the idea of inner heart and outer heart, he used the idea of heart and shoulder. Heart and shoulder. It's the same idea about heart and shoulder. And he said, why do I explain the idea about heart and shoulder? Because the shoulder is a place where you're used to carrying a burden. That's what it's designed for. You carry weight on your shoulder. Even in modern day, when you have a big backpack, you put it on your shoulders, and that's where you carry that burden. So Rav Wolbe, when he spoke about this Mishnah, he said that everyone has to learn that you can touch your heart, physically touch your heart, and that represents, that will connect you emotionally to your inner core, and you can touch your shoulder, and that will connect you to certain things you don't have to let affect you, because you can be zorem, you can be natural, you can be smooth. And Rav Wolbe told his Talmidim in this Vad that they had, of Avodas HaMidas, that they should all practice doing this. They did it in the Vad. Rav Shochotovich and his friends, they went like this. And then Rav Wolbe guided them through, and he said to them, okay, think of something that you have in your life right now, which is bothering you to a point where it's affecting not only that topic, but it's also affecting your state of how you relate to your learning. It disturbs you when you try and learn. Something which is bothering you also when you relate to your wife, when you try to be at home and be in a calm state, but it affects you there too. So everyone in the Vad they were in with Rav Wolbe was thinking of these things. And then Rav Wolbe said, okay, lift up your hand. And they said, okay. And then they said, are you thinking of the idea now? And they said, yes. And he said, do this. And they went like this, on their shoulder. Boom. And Rav Wolbe said, I've given you a gift for life. The rest of your lives, whenever something you feel is causing you to enter the path of Leiv Ra, you can sense that this topic that you just experienced now is entering for you into a place which is going to take you into a negative state. Then you do this action physically. You physically do this action of boom, where in a sense you're putting it in its place. You're saying my core self is natural, like a child. A child plays. He gets into a moment of a state where everything has gone wrong, where they took away his toy, but then he's able to, like Moshe Rabbeinu, who got a shock when he had to jump away. That's also from Rav Wolbe, that idea of jumping away when there's a shock of the snake. Okay, momentarily I'm shaken, but you don't have to enter a Leiv Ra. Rather, you can say, I got a shock for a moment, something didn't go my way. You put it on your shoulder. And Rav Shochotovich said that it was amusing that in the future, after that point on, it was a chabura of friends. So from time to time, he would see one of his friends going like this. And then he would go up to him and would say, and they would say, They knew. That was their code word amongst themselves. You don't have to enter a Leiv Ra. You could remain in Leiv Tov. So that would just give a tangible action where you know how to put it in its place. To say, something happened, it doesn't have to affect my core essence. My core essence is natural. Totzaot Chaim, like the Mishle said. I have a natural place which emanates from. So let's just summarize everything we said. Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai asked his Talmidim to find the one trait or the one mindset that will guide you through life. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach chose Leiv Tov. Leiv Tov means you have a natural state where you're in a good place. You're always in a good place. And even when external, that's the key word there, external bad things happen to you, you recognize them as external to yourself. You don't align them with who you are. It doesn't affect your core sense of self. I'll just give another mashal quickly. If you don't do well in a test, then you didn't do well in a test. It doesn't mean anything about your core sense of self. If you have a child and the child misbehaved, then are you now a bad father? No. There was something that happened that has to be attended to, but it's a specific thing, external, which has to be attended to. It doesn't relate to me being bad. And if my football team misses the goal, then of course, that doesn't affect my core state. I have a natural sense of self, which is good. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made us good. He made us yashar. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach was guiding us. Our final point was, with all of these five, how do you then see how that relates back to the traits of who they are? And that was the point that we did with all the other four. Let's do the final one now. Brilliant! Ma'ayan HaMitgaber. What is a Ma'ayan HaMitgaber? It's a source of life which is constantly flowing. Amazing. Can you see the idea? Meaning a person who's in tune with his inner source of life, he's in a state of Leiv Tov, then no matter what's happening, some poison might be poured on his Ma'ayan, right? But if poison was thrown into a well, not a well, a bore, that wouldn't be good. Now there's a poisoned amount of water and it's remaining there stagnant, right? But if poison is poured into a mayan, a mitgaber, an overflowing spring, then after a minute or two, you can drink freely. Why? Because no bad affects you. You're at the source of life. You're at the place of goodness. All bad things that ever happen to you, that occur to you in life, you all see as external. Nothing affects you. And you're not even bitter about it. You're not in a state of being mavater. You're not saying, oh, I'll let this one pass because never mind, and hopefully I'll get back at them at some point. You don't need to. You've connected that inner state, that natural, that the way that Hashem made you, the way that you see children are. It's the core sense of who you are, the Leiv Tov. That's the secret of Leiv Tov. It's something which, if you're not aware of, you will often find yourself in Leiv Ra, and you won't even know how you got there. You'll just be upset with this one, frustrated at that one, upset with this scenario, and blame the world and blame more external things because you're not aware that it's a choice. But we learn from Sefer HaChinuch that it is a choice. Leiv Tov and Leiv Ra are always in front of you. And if you ever find yourself at that crossroads, you now have Rav Volbe's words of put it on the shoulder. You just do that action. Okay, something happened. There it is. But I'm a Mayana Mitgaber. I'm an overflowing spring. The core of life was within me, not within the football player, and it's not within the stock exchange. It's not within my test. It's not within anything external. The source of life is within me, and therefore I can return to that Leiv Tov and continue my life in a good place. Yashar Koach. Aaron, will you